Irina Gunkei reporting there, and guess what? She's here now. You did that yesterday, didn't you?
Here I am.
But she's still here on set. She's talking about Joe Biden, spoke about the Buffalo shooting yesterday, saying white supremacy will not win. What do the papers have to say about it, Erin?
Well, I'll start, Stuart, with the Washington Post, which spoke to black residents of Buffalo, who say that this mass shooting is somewhat of a climax, if you will, in the historic structural racism in the city of Buffalo. The supermarket where the white supremacists killed nearly a dozen black people was a hangout spot where they say it was a sense of community and necessary as a form of protection there in a city where many black people have faced decades of discrimination and abuse. Buffalo is the 7th most segregated city in the United States, according to this Washington Post piece, and that very segregation turned the neighborhood into a target, Stuart. The segregation, it's worth mentioning, like many parts in the U.S., dates back to the Jim Crow period. Black residents fleeing from the South in the Great Migration, choosing cities in the North where they could have jobs, where they were a little bit more free. But as those black residents started to go into these big cities, racist housing policies essentially relegated them to lower-end areas, invested in whiter areas of the city, and this is still seen today.
And as is often the case, I suppose, in these kind of cases, a blame game starting over who is responsible.
Yeah, Stuart, the Wall Street Journal describes it as a despicable rush to blame a deranged killer on Republicans. This opinion piece lambasting Democrats for essentially exploiting replacement theory, so this racist idea that motivated the killer, as a stigma to call anyone who doesn't like open border policies or critical race theory as a racist. He also criticizes Democrats for claiming that conservatives are accomplices in racially motivated terrorism, claiming that whenever a person of color kills white people, the media turns away. The president doesn't give speeches about how democracy is in danger, as Biden did on Tuesday. He argues that instead, the conversation should be about mental illness. He's saying that clearly this killer was, yes, maybe racist and anti-Semitic, but mostly just mentally ill. In a New York Times piece, Stuart, the columnist Jamel Bowie says that the Republican Party today is virtually indistinguishable from this great replacement rhetoric. To respond essentially to the Wall Street Journal piece, he quotes several Republicans who indeed are openly saying that Democrats are trying to remake the country's demographics to ensure that they'll win more elections in the future. Also mentions Tucker Carlson of Fox News, who said last year that Joe Biden wants to change the racial mix of the country, and who mentioned the replacement theory on more than 400 episodes of his show. He says the point of making the connection between this rhetoric and Republicans is not to say that they're responsible for the violence, but that they're cynically adopting this type of discourse for the sake of gaining power, despite the violence that it clearly engenders. So both sides, Stuart, essentially are blaming each other for exploiting these types of racial incidents and killings, really, for political gain.
Well, let's stay in the US for this next story. Millions voted in primaries on Tuesday. In Pennsylvania, some suggest the Democrats may just have found their response to Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's right, Stuart. His name is John Fetterman. Rolling Stone says that his landslide win in Pennsylvania's Senate Democratic primary defies easy categorization, and I quote, at a time when Democrats are desperate to identify what kind of candidate can win despite Joe Biden's relative unpopularity. So what worked for him? Well, the Rolling Stone says that he doesn't neatly fit on a spectrum. On the one hand, he has advanced degrees from Harvard. He has progressive credentials because he supported Bernie Sanders. He supports legalizing marijuana. But he also has an aesthetic that's more appealing to blue-collar voters, according to this piece. He's very tall. He's bald. He's got tattoos. He's got a beard. He's often wearing a hoodie and baggy gym shorts. He's also defended fracking as a source for jobs and embraced police reform that's more kind of centrist and reflected than some of the more progressive parts of the Democratic Party. The piece, Stuart, says that the question looking ahead is whether his kind of label-defying campaigning will be able to transcend party lines, especially as Trump's election conspiracies are expected to dominate the debates in the Pennsylvania races. If it does work, they're suggesting that this could offer clues for Democrats on how to make themselves more appealing to a wider pool of voters.
Let's talk about the French press now. They're talking about just how deadly pollution is.
Yeah, this Le Monde piece is based on a study by the British medical journal The Lancet. It says air, water, and ground pollution cause 3 times more deaths than AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. Of course, 90% of these deaths are in countries in the global south, primarily in Southeast Asia. I'll make a quick connection, Stuart, to the French press's reaction this morning to the new Prime Minister, Elizabeth Borne, because speaking of climate issues, the cover of Libération says that even though Macron says he'll prioritize climate change and ecological transition, this paper is skeptical about her capacity to really effectuate the change that's necessary. They say that she's a soft ecologist. Her early statements, they say that we need to simply act quicker and stronger to address climate change. They say is not a good first sign. They're saying that they would have preferred the phrase that this is really the battle of the century to better acknowledge just how high the stakes are. Many commentators for now really skeptical as to whether or not she's really going to make the radical changes required.
We shall see. Now, Erin is finishing for us with a story about an Eritrean cyclist. Didn't quite go as planned, did it?
Yeah, the photo in this Parisian piece, Stuart, suggests what happened. This is somewhat of a public service announcement, if I may, Stuart. That's because Binyam Girmay became the first Black African to win a stage of the Grand Tour in the Giro d'Italia on Tuesday. Yeah. But he missed the press conference where he was supposed to expand upon that because when he opened the bottle of prosecco, he's holding his eye. As you can see, that's because the cork popped up into his eye, injuring him, forcing him to cut his celebration short and go to the hospital. He's still hospitalized. Hopefully this won't prevent him from continuing, but it's worth mentioning, as this piece does, that apparently days earlier, one of his opponents, a Dutch cyclist, almost had the exact same problem. So it's worth reminding viewers that if you're celebrating with bottles of prosecco that you're shaking, pay attention to your eyes. Don't need any more accidents.
Two dangers of being on the podium: one, the champagne cork; the other, just falling off it, I suppose, as well as the other one. Erin, thanks very much. Erin Agunkaye there. Dominating this half hour of the news bulletin on France 24. More coming up for you very shortly here on France 24. Do stay with us.